Welcome back with me, Melissa Ong. Small and medium enterprises are often called the backbone of Malaysia's economy. They power local industries, create jobs and drive innovation. As the government prepares to table Budget 2026, expectations are high for measures that can strengthen business confidence, ease financial pressures and position our SMEs to compete not just locally but across ASEAN and of course beyond. Now to discuss this, I'm joined by Datuk William Ng, President of the Small and Medium Enterprises Association of Malaysia, or SAMENTA. Thanks for doing this, Datuk. I'd like to begin with this. With Budget 2026 being tabled this afternoon, much depends on how it restores business and investor confidence. Now, what kind of budget signals or policy directions would reassure SMEs that the government remains committed to stability and also long-term growth? Datuk.
Thank you, Melissa. I think, first of all, I'm really looking forward to the Minister's budget reading later today. As you know, this will be the first budget under the 13 Malaysian Plan. And if you recall, one of the key pillars of the 13 Malaysian Plan was the scaling up of our SMEs. The idea, of course, was that we need to move our micro SMEs to the small SMEs to medium, and so on. To do so, we're supposed to focus on three things: increasing the export percentage of our SMEs, to improve our productivity generally, and of course to provide tailored capital access to our SMEs. What I think there are missed opportunities in the IMK 13, I think the 13 Malaysian Plan is generally sound. So as such, I think the Budget 2026, the one they're going to be announcing this afternoon, will be a real test to see whether we are truly focused on delivering on the 13 Malaysian Plan in terms of helping our SMEs to export, including of course first-time exporters, as well as in supporting productivity growth among SMEs and in providing easy access to financing for SMEs. I think based on our recent SAMENTA SME Outlook Survey, SMEs are generally in a state of what I call cautious optimism. Most believe that the economy is on the right track, and in fact, many believe that the economy will continue to become better. So I think that is a good starting point. But we also have many SMEs who are complaining of increased regulatory burden, not just cost, but compliance issues. So on top of, I think, delivering on what we have promised under the 13 Malaysian Plan, this budget must also address the key pain points of SMEs, which for the past 2 years have been the rising costs and of course the increased regulatory burden. You spoke a bit about stability and long-term growth, and in my mind, I think you cannot start by saying, that's where we want to get the SMEs to be. In this case, high export numbers and whatnot, without, I think, first addressing these issues on cost and regulatory pain points. So I think, like it or not, what matters to our SMEs in this budget, beside the tax reliefs, the financial incentives and so on, are really measures to ease the rising costs. I think we have given our feedback to the various ministries, so I hope that some of these would appear in the budget 2026.
Now, Dato', talking about expansion. Now, given Malaysia's position with ASEAN, do you think this budget should prioritize incentives that help SMEs expand regionally, or should they focus more on domestic cost pressures first? And if so, how can Budget 2026 balance both objectives effectively?
We must do both. I think it's very clear. I think our survey shows that most of our SMEs are actually heavily reliant on domestic market, not so much on export. So we cannot ignore the fact that the current demand domestically is actually very soft, and that's hurting our SMEs. So I think while we want to drive measures to ease this domestic cost pressure, such as managing inflation and so on, we must also look beyond our borders. Only 13% of our SMEs have got no export exposure, but very few of them are intense exporters, so to speak. And I think international expansion, be it ASEAN or elsewhere, is a key to long-term resilience among our SMEs. So our hope is that Budget 2026 will provide targeted export facilitation grant. We already have some. I hope that will be top up on things like the market development grant and so on. And of course, grants for activities like certification for export, market immersion, and so on. I think the government's vision especially this year, now that we are the chairman of ASEAN, is really to strengthen regional supply chains and improve market access for SMEs. In fact, this being literally our back, intra-ASEAN trade is only about 21%. So only 21%. Is double of that in Europe. So obviously, there are plenty of opportunity to grow intra-ASEAN trade. We only have a few months to go before we hand over our chairmanship of ASEAN to the Philippines next year. So I think we need to set the tone for ASEAN in growing intra-regional trade. And I think budget 2026 in that sense, if it includes elements of supporting our SMEs to grow into ASEAN, I think that will send the right message, not only to the SMEs, but also to our trading partners within the region.
Now, SMEs continue to face liquidity challenges and also rising costs. Should Budget 2026 introduce new credit facilities or perhaps extend existing guarantee schemes to ease cash flow pressures? And how can that be done without increasing fiscal strain?
Yeah, this is an ongoing issue. The government keep telling us that there are plenty of liquidity in the market. If any business, including SMEs, require some form of a credit, there are plenty available out there, and we don't deny that. But there's also the issue of access to this capital from the SMEs. So what we need really is a budget that can focus on strengthening the financial ecosystem for the SMEs, not just the availability of credit, but making it easy to be accessed by the SME as well. I think one of the first things that we should do, and we have been doing that for a number of years now, is to expand on the existing guarantee schemes under SJPP, under SGGC, and so on. So our survey, the one that I mentioned earlier, found that while some of the SMEs have easy access to funding, many face constraints for various reasons. It could be the size of the business, it could be because their business is new, it could be because they have no collateral, and so on. So and therefore, I think we should also explore alternative financing instruments. For example, revenue-based financing. So not just collateralized, but revenue-based and supply chain solutions. I think to do this without straining the fiscal position of the government, we can obviously leverage on our collaborations with fintech, the P2P players, and so on, so that we can widen access and reduce our reliance on the traditional banks in a sense. So I think if you don't do that, even if you continue to pump millions of ringgit into guarantee, you will find the take-up rate to be low, especially for businesses in the service sector and the micro enterprises who continue to be underfinanced.
Now, I understand many businesses are hoping this budget will avoid new or higher taxes. In your view, Datuk, what kind of tax or compliance measures would best support SMEs' competitiveness while still maintaining fiscal discipline?
Yeah, nobody likes tax. But first off, I think fiscal discipline is very important. We need to obviously narrow the deficit, that's for sure. But the competitiveness of our businesses, especially among the SMEs, are equally important. I think over the past 3 years, we've been focused on expanding the tax base so that we can narrow that the deficit. So essentially, we have been finding new and creative ways to collect more revenue for the government. So you see introduction of all sorts of taxes, the latest of which, of course, was the increase and expansion of the SST. But we are also seeing a very clear, very sharp decline and compression of margin among our SMEs. Some are so bad that SMEs become unprofitable and some have to close down. So I think all the indication that we get is, so far, is that there will be no new expansion of taxes to allow some breathing room for SMEs. So we hope that that's true. That will be what will be announced this afternoon. But I think there are already a few taxes that already was announced in last year's budget. This include, for example, the carbon tax mechanism for several sectors. I think the upcoming budget will likely set a price and mechanism for that. I think one of the things we need to do urgently, and I think the budget may or may not be able to address this, is really the issue of compliance costs. We must bear in mind that it is not just the federal government we are talking about. There are the state governments, there are the PBT or the local authorities, and we've seen all sorts of fees increment by the local authorities over the past 3 years. So on top of not introducing any new taxes, I think there's a need for the government to try and rein in all these compliance costs. You make it easier for the SMEs to comply, then I think automatically you'll bring the cost down, and then you will not need to provide all these rebates and grants, etc., just to level the playing ground. And having said that, since we're on the topic of tax, I'm still hopeful, of course, to see a higher threshold for the chargeable income for the preferential rate for our SMEs, so that we can free up more capital for our SMEs to invest into their business.
Now, Datuk, let's talk about sustainability and inclusiveness, which has become central themes in government planning. What budget measures would help more SMEs adopt ESG practices, especially in less developed regions like the East Coast, Sabah and Sarawak? Your thoughts on this?
Thanks. Again, our survey shows that many SMEs are already beginning to adopt some kind of ESG practice. Mostly because of efficiency, because of cost saving, energy is concerned. But the primary barriers continue to be the lack of information or resources, whether in terms of money to invest in some of these energy efficient equipment, or to bring in trained sustainable professionals into their respective companies. The government, of course, has been very helpful. We have already introduced a tax deduction of up to 50,000 for ESG-related expenditure. I think that's a good start, and I hope that this will be continued in 2026, but I think that makes a difference. But I think to drive deeper adoption, we need to go beyond just tax deduction, as we have done over the past 2 years. One, I think that we need to double down on preferential loan rates for SMEs who are investing into making themselves more energy efficient, to adopt a bit more ESG and so on. I think many of the financial banks are already having some climate-related KPI internally, and are already offering preferential rates for companies who are ESG compliant or in the process of doing so. So I think the next step really is to fund more of these transitions, and when necessary, we provide the hand-holding to enable the transition. I think additionally, ESG aside, we should also focus on digital upskilling, and this is especially true for underserved states like the East Coast, like Sabah and Sarawak. I think the idea then is if you make digital so easy, so efficient, that you'll be boosting productivity, and in that sense, you narrow the gap between Klang Valley, Johor and Penang with some of these other regions that are underserved.
Well, Datuk William, as usual, thank you so much for your insights and your perspectives to make it clear for us. But supporting SMEs isn't just about recovery, and it's about building confidence and competitiveness for the long term. We'll speak to you soon again, Datuk William. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.